Real quickly before we begin, I want to thank this video's sponsor, carmarshal.com. Carmarshal.com can save you lots of money on buying used or new vehicles, cars, trucks, school buses. If you want to save money, I'll have a link in the description down below. I know I'm going to.
The history of hemp, America's love-hate relationship with one of the planet's most useful plants. Hemp has the potential to be used in more than 25,000 products, which may explain why the federal government has wrongfully kept it classified as a Schedule I drug. By J. Sermopoulos, April 20, 2018. Understanding the long history of hemp and its criminalization in America is important, as it is the story of a plant that was criminalized by the U.S. government at the behest of oligarchic titans of industry, in an effort to protect their respective business empires from being overtaken by hemp. Hemp is a specific variety of cannabis plant grown for the industrial and commercial uses of its fiber, which contain almost no THC, the psychoactive compound in cannabis that alters an individual's mental state upon ingestion. In fact, hemp was grown for hundreds of years even by some of the founding fathers, mainly for the multi-use fiber in its stalk. Industrial hemp has the potential to replace many of the currently used fossil fuel-based products, as it can be used in a reported 25,000 products, perhaps explaining why a substance that has no psychoactive value is treated as a controlled substance by the U.S. federal government, classified as a Schedule I drug. As a report, entitled Hemp as an Agricultural Commodity by the Congressional Research Service, CRS, notes, hemp is also from the same species of plant, Cannabis sativa, as marijuana. As a result, production in the United States is restricted due to hemp's association with marijuana, and the U.S. market is largely dependent on imports. The CRS report specifies, under current U.S. drug policy, all cannabis varieties including industrial hemp are considered Schedule I controlled substances under the Controlled Substances Act, CSA, 1, and DEA continues to control and regulate hemp production. How and why was hemp outlawed? It is important to understand why this plant became illegal in the United States, since the use, possession, and sale of cannabis are the most common reasons for an individual to be incarcerated in a U.S. jail or prison. Prior to 1937, hemp was legally grown in the U.S., but the passage of the Marijuana Tax Act, while not technically criminalizing hemp, taxed hemp in such a way as to make it unlawful to possess or grow. The legislation was worded in such a way that anyone wanting to grow hemp had to possess a marijuana tax stamp. But in order to receive a stamp, an individual was required to be in possession of cannabis, which was illegal if not in possession of a stamp. This self-incriminating requirement made it so if someone attempted to register while in possession of cannabis, they were arrested. For those that did not have cannabis in their possession when registering, they were simply denied a tax stamp. Although the law contained an unconstitutional self-incriminating requirement in violation of the Fifth Amendment, it was not until 32 years later, in 1969, that the Marijuana Tax Act was declared unconstitutional. It is important to understand that the passage of the Marijuana Tax Act was not due to a social need, but clearly derived from the societal power elite and their political cronies operating in unison to protect timber, petrochemical, pharmaceutical, tobacco, and news tycoons, as they feared industrial hemp would come to dominate their industries. Additionally, hemp was generally grown by poor, working-class farmers. Thus corporate mass media and the political establishment made no profit from the industry. Many experts believe that if hemp was legalized in the U.S., it would become the #1 cash crop in the country. In the 1930s, machines including the hemp dresser and the decorticator vastly improved the efficiency of harvest and manufacturing processes that strip hemp fiber, making them more affordable and practical for common people to use, thus posing a threat to the oligarchs of industry, as a number of their companies were reliant on less sustainable, non-recyclable resources. A Popular Mechanics magazine article published in February 1938 projected that domestically grown hemp could be worth $1 billion. Jack Herer wrote in his book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes. In 1916, USDA Bulletin number 404 reported that 1 acre of cannabis hemp, in annual rotation over a 20-year period, would produce as much pulp for paper as 4.1 acres of trees being cut down over the same 20-year period. This process would use only 1/7 to 1/4 as much polluting sulfur-based acid chemicals to break down the glue-like lignin that binds the fibers of the pulp, or even none at all using soda ash. All this lignin must be broken down to make pulp. Hemp pulp is only 4 to 10% lignin, while trees are 18 to 30% lignin. The problem of dioxin contamination of rivers is avoided in the hemp paper making process, which does not need to use chlorine bleach, as the wood pulp paper making process requires, but instead substitutes safer hydrogen peroxide in the bleaching process. Thus, hemp provides 4 times as much pulp with at least 4 to 7 times less pollution. As we have seen, this hemp pulp paper potential depended on the invention and the engineering of new machines for stripping the hemp by modern technology. This would also lower demand for lumber and reduce the cost of housing, while at the same time helping reoxygenate the planet. As an example, if the new, 1916, hemp pulp paper process were in use legally today, it would soon replace about 70% of all wood pulp paper, including computer printout paper, corrugated boxes, and paper bags. If hemp had not been made illegal, 80% of DuPont's business would never have materialized, and the great majority of the pollution which has poisoned our northwestern and southeastern rivers would not have occurred. Had hemp remained legal, DuPont would have been directly challenged, as hemp can be used to create biodegradable plastics without the use of pollutants or chemicals, thus causing DuPont to become one of the great supporters of criminalizing hemp. Another titan of industry that sought to criminalize hemp was publishing magnate William Randolph Hearst, who founded the Hearst Corporation in 1887. Hearst's publication empire, which had a major influence on public opinion, was used to run propaganda and yellow journalism to shape public perceptions, as his papers reportedly had over 20 million readers. Publishers like Hearst and Pulitzer had a vested interest in propagandizing the public in an effort to criminalize cannabis for their own personal financial motives, as a move toward hemp would have required the newspaper industry to shift operations from using tree pulp to hemp pulp for use in their publications. The publishers engaged in distributing outright lies that claimed cannabis caused mass murder and insanity. The Marijuana Tax Act, passed in 1937, made no differentiation between highly psychoactive cannabis and varieties with virtually no psychoactive components used for their fibers. With the Tax Act in place, already profitable industries were protected from competition from hemp. Additionally, it gave the government the power to target and incarcerate immigrants and African Americans who smoked cannabis. For a brief period, after the United States entered World War II in 1941, the nation's hemp cultivation efforts were brought back to life with the release of the film Hemp for Victory, to encourage American farmers to grow as much hemp as possible for the war effort. Following the end of the war, domestic production of hemp once again disappeared. After the Marijuana Tax Act was declared unconstitutional in 1969, the U.S. government passed the Controlled Substances Act, a statute that regulates all cannabis, including industrial hemp. The definition of marijuana, included in the CSA, excluded certain parts of hemp: sterilized hemp seed, hemp fiber, and hemp seed oil from regulation. A federal court case in 2004 ruled that the DEA did not have authority to regulate the excluded hemp parts under the CSA. The passage of the 2014 Farm Bill included Section 7606, which allowed states to implement laws allowing state departments of agriculture and universities to grow hemp for research or pilot programs. Last month, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, RKY, introduced the Hemp Farming Act of 2018, which seeks to remove hemp from the federal government's controlled substances list and to legalize it as an agriculture commodity. The bill is co-sponsored by Senators Ron Wyden, D.O.R., and Rand Paul, RKY. Congressman James Comer, RKY, is set to introduce a companion hemp legalization bill in the U.S. House of Representatives. A press release from Senator McConnell claimed that the bill seeks to The Hemp Farming Act of 2018 will help Kentucky enhance its position as the leading state on hemp production. It builds upon the success we have seen through the hemp pilot programs by allowing states to be the primary regulators of hemp if the U.S. Department of Agriculture approves their implementation plan. This legislation also will remove the federal barriers in place that have stifled the industry, which will help expand the domestic production of hemp. It will also give hemp researchers the chance to apply for competitive federal grants from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, allowing them to continue their impressive work with the support of federal research dollars. Senator Wyden, a co-sponsor of the bill, wrote in a statement, "It is far past time for Congress to pass this common sense, bipartisan legislation to end the outrageous anti-hemp, anti-farmer and anti-job stigma that's been codified into law and is holding back growth in American agriculture jobs and our economy at large. Hemp products are made in this country, sold in this country and consumed in this country. Senator McConnell, our colleagues, and I are going to keep pushing to make sure that if Americans can buy hemp products at the local supermarket, American farmers can grow hemp in this country." The Hemp Farming Act of 2018 was placed on a fast track through the U.S. Senate on Monday, allowing it to skip the typical committee hurdles that newly announced bills ordinarily face. A spokesperson for Senator McConnell told The Hill that the majority leader has yet to announce when the bill will be taken up for a vote.
Long ago, when these ancient Grecian temples were new, hemp was already old in the service of mankind. For thousands of years even then, this plant had been grown for cordage and coarse cloth in China and elsewhere in the East. For centuries prior to about 1850, all the ships that sailed the western seas were rigged with hempen rope and sails. For the sailor, no less than the hangman, hemp was indispensable. A 44-gun frigate, like our cherished old Ironsides, took over 60 tons of hemp for rigging, including an anchor cable 25 inches in circumference. The Conestoga wagons and prairie schooners of pioneer days were covered with hempen canvas. Indeed, the very word canvas comes from the Arabic word for hemp. In those days, hemp was an important crop in Kentucky and Missouri. Then came cheaper imported fibers for cordage, like jute, sisal, and manila hemp, and the culture of hemp in America declined. But now, with Philippine and East Indian sources of hemp in the hands of the Japanese, and shipment of jute from India curtailed, American hemp must meet the needs of our Army and Navy as well as of our industries. In 1942, patriotic farmers at the government's request planted 36,000 acres of seed hemp, an increase of several thousand%. The goal for 1943 is 50,000 acres of seed hemp. In Kentucky, much of the seed hemp acreage is on river bottom land such as this, along the Kentucky River Gorge. Some of these fields are inaccessible except by boat. Thus, plans are afoot for a great expansion of the hemp industry as a part of the war program. This film is designed to tell farmers how to handle this ancient crop, now little known outside Kentucky and Wisconsin. This is hemp seed. Be careful how you use it. For to grow hemp legally, you must have a federal registration and tax stamp. This is provided for in your contract. Ask your AAA committeeman or your county agent about it. Don't forget, hemp demands a rich, well-drained soil such as is found here in the bluegrass region of Kentucky or in central Wisconsin. It must be loose and rich in organic matter. Poor soils won't do. Soil that will grow good corn will usually grow hemp. Hemp is not hard on the soil. In Kentucky, it has been grown for several years on the same ground, though this practice is not recommended. A dense and shady crop, hemp tends to choke out weeds. Here's a Canada thistle that couldn't stand the competition. Dead as a dodo. Thus, hemp leaves the ground in good condition for the following crop. For fiber, hemp should be sown 5 pecks to the acre. With drill, the closer the rows, the better. These rows are spaced about 4 inches. This hemp has been broadcast. Either way, it should be sown thick enough to grow a slender stalk. Here's an ideal stand. The right height to be harvested easily, thick enough to grow slender stalks that are easy to cut and process. Stalks like these here on the left, they yield the most fiber and the best. Those on the right are too coarse and woody. For seed, hemp is planted in hills like corn, sometimes by hand. Hemp is a dioecious plant. The female flower is inconspicuous, but the male flower is easily spotted. In seed production, after the pollen has been shed, these male plants are cut out. These are the seeds on a female plant. Hemp for fiber is ready to harvest when the pollen is shedding and the leaves are falling. In Kentucky, hemp harvest comes in August. Here, the old standby has been the self-rake reaper, which has been used for a generation or more. Hemp grows so luxuriantly in Kentucky that harvesting is sometimes difficult, which may account for the popularity of the self-rake with its lateral stroke. A modified rice binder has been used to some extent. This machine works well in average hemp. Recently, the improved hemp harvester, used for many years in Wisconsin, has been introduced in Kentucky. This machine spreads the hemp in a continuous swath. It is a far cry from this fast and efficient modern harvester to the Armstrong model of yore. But here's one kind of harvester, at least, that doesn't stall in the heaviest hemp. In Kentucky, hand cutting is practiced in opening fields for the machines. In Kentucky, hemp is shucked as soon as safe after cutting, to be spread out for retting later in the fall. In Wisconsin, hemp is harvested in September. Here, the hemp harvester with automatic spreader is standard equipment. Note how smoothly the rotating apron lays the swath preparatory to retting. Here it is a common and essential practice to leave headlands around hemp fields. These strips may be planted to other crops, preferably small grain. Thus, the harvester has room to make its first round without preparatory hand cutting. Here the machine is running over corn stubble. When the cutter bar is much shorter than the hemp is tall, overlapping occurs. Not so good for retting. The standard cut is 8 to 9 feet. The length of time hemp is left on the ground to ret depends on the weather. The swaths must be turned to get a uniform ret. When the woody core breaks away readily, like this, the hemp is about ready to take up and bind into bundles. Well-retted hemp is light to dark gray. The fiber tends to pull away from the stalk. The presence of stalks in the bowstring stage indicates that retting is well underway. When hemp is short or tangled, or when the ground is too wet for machines, it is bound by hand. a wooden buck is used. Twine will do for tying, but the hemp itself makes a good band. When conditions are favorable, the pickup bander is commonly used. The swath should lie smooth and even with stalks parallel. The picker won't work well in tangled hemp. After binding, hemp is shucked as soon as possible to stop further retting. In 1942, 14,000 acres of fiber hemp were harvested in the United States. The goal for 1943 is 300,000 acres. Thus, hemp, Cannabis sativa, the old standby cordage fiber, is staging a strong comeback. This is Kentucky hemp going into the dryer of a mill at Versailles. In the old days, breaking was done by hand, one of the hardest jobs known to man. Now the power breaker makes quick work of it. Spinning American hemp into rope yarn or twine in the old Kentucky River Mill at Frankfort, Kentucky. Another pioneer plant that has been making cordage for more than a century. All such plants will presently be turning out products spun from American-grown hemp. Twine of various kinds for tying, winding armatures, and upholsterers' work. Rope for marine rigging and towing, for hay forks, derricks, and heavy-duty tackle. Light-duty fire hose. Thread for shoes for millions of American soldiers. And parachute webbing for our paratroopers. As for the United States Navy, every battleship requires 34,000 feet of rope, and other craft accordingly. So here in the Boston Navy Yard, where cables for frigates were made long ago, crews are now working night and day making cordage for the fleet. In the old days, rope yarn was spun by hand. Today, even the rope walk is mechanized. 160 fathoms to go. The rope yarn feeds through holes in an iron plate. This is Manila hemp from the Navy's rapidly dwindling reserve. When that is gone, American hemp will go on duty again. Hemp for mooring ships, hemp for tow lines. Hemp for tackle and gear. Hemp for countless naval uses, both on ship and shore. Just as in the days when old Ironside sailed the seas victorious, with her hempen shrouds and hempen sails. Hemp for victory.
Monday, a bipartisan bill in the Senate to continue to support this important Kentucky industry. It'll be the Hemp Farm Act of 2018. What will it do? First and foremost, this bill will finally legalize hemp as an agricultural commodity and remove it from the list of controlled substances. So by recognizing in federal statute the difference between hemp and its illicit cousin, we can allow this industry to continue to flourish here in Kentucky. You may remember the issues we've had with some federal agencies over the implementation of what Congress passed in the Farm Bill. I know some challenges remain today between the federal government and farmers and producers in Kentucky, but the goal of this new bill, should it become law, is to simply remove the roadblocks altogether. It would encourage innovation and development and support the domestic production of hemp. My bill will allow the states to be the primary regulators of hemp if they can develop a plan to properly monitor production. And with a strong supporter like Commissioner Quarles overseeing the production and sale of hemp, I'm confident Kentucky hemp will flourish under this new regulatory mechanism. My bill would also give hemp researchers the chance to apply for competitive federal grants from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. With these three features, legislation, state oversight, and federal grants, Kentucky can enhance its standing as a national hub for hemp farming, processing, and product manufacturing. Other members of our federal delegation obviously share my views. Senator Paul and Congressman Comer will also be working on this. We'll continue to work with hemp advocates in the states, other states, including many of those I had the privilege. Well, actually, this meeting this morning was, as I indicated earlier, really pretty inspirational. A lot of enthusiasm in the room for the potential for this industrial hemp and Kentucky's future in this area. So I'm going to continue to support Kentucky's hemp farmers and manufacturers in the Senate. I believe hemp has a bright future in our state. It's fine. It's now time to take the final step and make this a legal crop for every state that wants to file a plan with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And if they file that plan with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the regulatory mechanism comes from the federal government down to the state. So the way that would work here is that Commissioner Quarles and his team would have the regulatory oversight of this way forward, and the federal government would simply step aside. For any state that did not file a plan, the federal government would still be preeminent. But for those who are in the processing field, it would legalize the interstate transportation of hemp through a state that might not have taken the step of filing with USDA and therefore having the regulatory authority come down to the state. So that's the goal. We're continuing to work on the legislation. Many of the people involved in the room now have been working closely with my staff as we develop this legislation. We're going to give it everything we've got to pull it off in this year's Farm Bill. Thank you so much for being here.
We do have time for a couple short questions if you'd like to ask one. Lawrence?
Do you think that hemp can equal or even surpass what tobacco once was for Kentucky?
We hope that industrial hemp provides another alternative crop for our growers, another arrow in the quiver for the vast diversity that already exists in Kentucky agriculture. I grew up on a Kentucky tobacco farm. I paid for my college. There's countless other Kentuckians who have a background like that. We hope to position Kentucky to maximize the benefit of this crop once legalized, and so the economic activity stays right here. Whether it will rival tobacco, that's yet to be seen, but one thing I know for certain is that due to the farmer-led research here in Kentucky, we are the best positioned state in the nation to capture the economic impact of industrial hemp if and when it becomes commercialized. Right.
I just want to recognize the senator. I'm an 8th generation tobacco farmer from central Kentucky, very dependent on tobacco, and with your help, not only in the tobacco buyout in 2004, allowed me 10 years of transition from tobacco into hemp in 2014. The timing was perfect, by the way, Senator. I had 10 years of buyout to get me into hemp, but your leadership in the Farm Bill has allowed us to make a huge investment in hemp, and now I'm dependent on hemp and not tobacco. So with this legislation, it just opens up the entire world to what we've done here in Kentucky, and I just want to commend you for that.
You kind of touched upon this, but not everyone completely understands hemp. You know, the perception, like you said, sometimes goes to marijuana. Do you think you're going to have any issues, or how hard do you think it is going to be to get other legislators to get on board with this?
It was better than it used to be. In 2014, in getting the pilot project option in the Farm Bill, there was a lot of discussion about what is this? Is this the same as the illicit cousin? I think we've moved past that. I think most members of the Senate now understand it's two very different plants. There may be some continued discussion of that, but I think most everybody over the last course of the current Farm Bill now understands this is a totally different plant. And I don't think it will be brought up as much as it was in 2014 when we were trying to get the pilot programs done. Obviously, I'll be discussing with the Attorney General of the United States the issue as well, and making sure he also understands that. We had law enforcement people at our roundtable that we just finished. Are they still here? We had several law enforcement people here. I think I can safely say that Kentucky law enforcement is comfortable with where we are. I gather every Kentucky farmer would file with you, right?
Correct.
So let's say you're the local sheriff in Christian County. You know where the farmers who are growing industrial hemp are. They've filed with the Commissioner of Agriculture. So if they want to make a periodic stop, they can. Or if they see it being grown somewhere and there's no plan, then you got a problem. So I think Kentucky law enforcement, as a result of the great work that Commissioner Quarles has done, is comfortable with where we are. In 2014, I think there was still some queasiness about that. So I think we've worked our way through the education process of making sure everybody understands this is really a different plant. And so I don't anticipate that being as big a problem as it was in 2014.
We have time for one more question.
Leader McConnell, at a time when some even in your own party have questioned the spending in the omnibus bill, and they've wondered whether more subsidies are needed and whether the spending is really worth it. Why is the spending on this program and on grants in this program worth it when some in your own party are starting to question government spending?
Well, the omnibus bill included people from the administration involved in the negotiation with Senator Schumer, Leader Pelosi, Speaker Ryan, and myself. Our top priority was to get defense spending at a sufficient level to rebuild the military and protect the country. It was a bipartisan agreement. So you can't do a bipartisan agreement that doesn't have some things that the Democrats wanted. It's a classic bipartisan agreement. I think it met the needs, the principal needs of this administration and this Republican Congress. I didn't have any trouble voting for it, and the President signed it.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Leader, for being here today.
Hey, Charlotte County, this is Charlotte County COPWATCH, and I just wanted you to know that I am using this stuff under fair use. And also remember to like and subscribe this channel. Also too, keep in mind I do not make any money on YouTube. This is 5 hours work a day, you know, fighting for freedom. And you can donate with PayPal and Patreon. I just want you to think about this. If everybody gives to PayPal and Patreon is every month. Actually, PayPal you can do every month. I have 12,000 subscribers. If everybody gives, I can quit my regular job and go full-time investigations on Charlotte County and possibly even more and beyond. So just keep that in mind. If everybody helps out, I can go full-time doing this. Thanks.